Hi F1 and IndyCar fans, welcome to Formula Pun Racer, the channel where car racing and comedy collide. Today is March 23, 2026. I know, I'm a little late on my reviews of the latest rounds in F1 and IndyCars that took place earlier this month. Just been really busy, but I've watched all these races and they definitely have some exciting stuff to talk about, which I will give you the short video of each of these races to play catch up on. But I will say that before I get on with the first two F1 rounds which took place earlier this month in Australia and China, that the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian GPs that were supposed to be held later on this year have been postponed because of the conflict going on between Iran and Israel, which also unfortunately involves the United States. So there has been no replacement locations for these races, and who knows if they've been completely canceled at this time, but we'll get into that later. Now, to get on with the first round in Australia, I could say one thing. It was already hometown heartbreak for local lad Oscar Piastri, who finished runner-up in last year's championship with McLaren, because before the race even started, his car spun around on the pace lap, and he was out before it was over. Tough luck, mate. While it was disappointing that no success for Oscar Piastri on home soil was about to happen, as the lights went out and away they raced, it was Mercedes and Ferrari duking it out between each other. And it was pretty close, swapping the lead up until lap 11 when Isaac Hadjar's Ford-powered Red Bull came to a stop with engine troubles. This brought out the pace car, but unfortunately, Ferrari should have taken this opportunity during the caution to pit. Neither one of them did, which would eventually cost them the win, as Mercedes would pull ahead. Ferrari was barely able to hang on to third and fourth when all was said and done. The only other caution of the Australian GP was Valtteri Bottas' Cadillac out with engine problems. And that also brought out the safety car, but that didn't do anything for them. Once again, Ferrari did not pit under yellow, and basically it was Mercedes 1-2. George Russell would take the win, and his teammate, Kimi Antonelli of Italy, would finish second. Charles Leclerc Ferrari would finish third, and Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari would finish fourth. And as for Audi, well, at best, they finished ninth with Gabriel Bortoleto, but it was already somewhat a mixed bag, not just because that the fact that Audi got points on their debut race, but Nico Hülkenberg failed to start with engine troubles, so Audi was dead last in this race. But as for Aston Martin, things were not going well at all, because ever since testing in both Saudi Arabia and Barcelona, Bahrain and Barcelona, my mistake, that the car has been plagued with many power unit problems, and the aerodynamics of the car just suck. In fact, the car has been shaking so much that Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll have been saying in both this race as well as China that it shook so much that they had to retire the cars before they crashed out, because the Aston Martin team, for all the bajillion bucks of investments they got, they have no spare parts for this Honda power unit. So apparently the British team just can't get a break. So they pulled the cars into the pits just to save it. And the season for Aston Martin, both in Australia and China so far, has been nothing but a glorified test session. And the results are not promising at this time. And on top of that, Adrian Newey, who designed this car, one of the best F1 car designers in the business, has decided to take a step down from Aston Martin, from team principal. He's still with the team, but just not in the team principal manner. And they're possibly thinking of bringing in Jonathan Wheatley, who was formerly the team principal of Team Audi, to take over the reins. As for Adrian Newey to take a step back, this gives him the opportunity to focus more on the technical issues, and we can only hope and pray that they can iron out the wrinkles that have been plaguing Aston Martin these first two rounds that hasn't been doing well. In addition to Bortoleto giving Audi its first points finish on its debut run, Arvid Landblid, the rookie from England, got his first points finish as well in his first race, finishing in 8th for Racing Bulls. Now on to China. Once again, it was Mercedes versus Ferrari all the way around. But on another development, Alexander Albon and both McLaren drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, would not even make the start because their cars were a bust with engine troubles.
Oh.
Oh yeah, and Gabe Bortoletto's Audi was out before the race too, in fact. Almost forgot to mention him. So that's 4 cars out before the race even started. Apparently these new F1 regulation changes in regards to power units and chassis and aerodynamic designs have been plaguing some of the teams, and I'd say Aston Martin and Cadillac have come off worse thus far. In fact, they are the only 2 teams thus far to have not scored any constructors' points in the first 2 rounds. Hopefully, maybe that will change. It's just nice to know that at the 12 Hours of Sebring, which occurred 2 days ago, Cadillac and Aston Martin fared much better in a way. Like, Cadillac finished 3rd overall in the Hypercar series, as well as overall, just being beaten by the Stuttgart Shuttles of Porsche, finishing 1-2 by Team Penske. And Aston Martin finished 2nd in the GTD class, with the Heart of Racing team just being beaten by a Ferrari in the last 5 minutes. So, at least so far, Ferrari has finally won in some capacity in sports cars this year. Let's see how well they do at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but that's another story. Back to China. And I will say one thing. The race began with Kimi Antonelli taking his debut pole-sitting position, and he's the youngest driver to take pole in F1 at the age of 19. When the lights were out, it was Ferrari versus Mercedes for the most part of the race, and on lap 33, one of the bigger highlights other than victory was seeing the Alpine of Franco Colapinto and the Haas of Esteban Ocon tangle with each other, and they spun around almost in perfect sync. Wonderful ballerinas these drivers would make. When the checkered flag flew, it was Kimi Antonelli taking his first F1 victory, the 2nd youngest driver to win in Formula 1 after Max Verstappen. Kimi Antonelli is the first Italian driver to win in F1 since Giancarlo Fisichella won the 2006 Malaysian Grand Prix driving for Renault with teammates to Fernando Alonso at the time. Of course, now the Renault team is turned into the Alpine team with Mercedes power units. George Russell finished 2nd. Another Mercedes 1-2 this year so far. And George Russell still holds the points lead with Kimi Antonelli 2nd. Lewis Hamilton has finally gotten his first podium finish with Ferrari, and I'm sure it's something he's really proud about. And the crowds love it too. And Charles Leclerc would finish 4th. So congratulations, Kimi Antonelli, on your first F1 victory. And kudos to Lewis Hamilton for finishing 3rd at China for Ferrari. And China, 20 years ago, was the last place Ferrari driver Michael Schumacher would take his 99th and final career victory. Good times that was. But that's an interesting record. And who is the youngest to have won an F1 thus far? Well, it's still the Flying Dutchman, Max Verstappen, whose race in China was not a good one, but with 4 in a row championships for the Flying Dutchman, anything could happen, even if driving for Red Bull with a new power unit, which is Ford, that might turn around. We'll see. Yes! Now to get on with the INDYCar rounds that have occurred in St. Petersburg, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, and Arlington, Texas. We begin with the Grand Prix of St. Pete. It all began with Scott McLaughlin of New Zealand driving for Team Penske starting on pole. And he got off to a clean start with Andretti Global driver Marcus Ericsson starting 2nd right behind him. Unfortunately, since I mentioned Michael Schumacher earlier, his son Mick Schumacher was making his debut race in IndyCar driving for Rahal Letterman Lanigan, and unfortunately, just a few corners in, trouble would ensue for the young German driver, and it would end disastrously because ahead of him, Stingray Robb and Santino Ferrucci were neck and neck with each other, neither one giving him an inch. Ferrucci was forced into the wall. Stingray Robb moved on ahead but was penalized for it. And Mick Schumacher, with nowhere to go behind them, went right into the rear of those cars. Game over for 2 out of 3, while Robb continued on with a penalty. Either way, Stingray Robb's chances of winning were as mashed as a potato, since he's from Idaho. At one point, the two Marcuses, Ericsson of Sweden driving for Andretti Global and Armstrong of New Zealand with Meyer Shank, were neck and neck with one another down the front stretch. But let's just say that Ericsson's attempts to get by Armstrong were not well met. Nevertheless, it was still a clean maneuver, and Armstrong still got by Ericsson, so no penalties for either driver. But that was tough. But Andretti Global's fortunes were not so shining, because Will Power of Australia crashed out in the same spot he had done so in practice because his car's grip was just not staying with. And as for Scott Dixon of New Zealand driving for Chip Ganassi Racing, well, St. Pete is a racetrack he has yet to win on, and unfortunately, the jinx of that fact struck again because in his latest pit stop, someone did put the wheel nut on right on his right rear, and after leaving the pits, the right rear came off and his day was done.
Hey, where'd that wheel come from?
But through it all, Alex Palou of Spain, Scott Dixon's teammate, managed to get by Scott McLaughlin to lead over 50 laps and take his first win of the season. Congratulations on the 4-time IndyCar champion and last year's Indy 500 winner for putting on a solid performance, leaving all his competitors in the dust. Scott McLaughlin would finish second, Christian Lundgaard would finish third, and Kyle Kirkwood would finish fourth. Congratulations, and St. Peter's burgers and fries all around for the young Spaniard.
All right!
In addition to Alex Palou's dominant performance in St. Pete, I gotta say kudos to Dale Coyne for both cars finishing the top 10, like Romain Grosjean would finish 8th, and his Norwegian rookie teammate Dennis Hauger, last year's Indy Next champion, would finish 10th. Unfortunately, the next round, which was held 6 days afterwards in Phoenix, would be a big gremlin for Dale Coyne Racing because Grosjean's car was plagued with mechanical issues, so it didn't even make the start. But as for the race itself, after an 8-year absence, IndyCar being back at the Phoenix International Raceway, it was David Malukas driving for Team Penske taking his first career pole, and his teammate Joseph Newgarden would start second, and it would be a clean start for the Penske boys as they scouted on ahead. And the first incident occurred for Dale Coyne Racing driver Dennis Hauger, when in front of Christian Rasmussen down the backstretch, he spun around, but miraculously was able to keep his car off the wall, so he went sliding backwards down the backstretch, hitting nothing, and would continue on to finish 15th. Yeah, that is impressive. I say Dennis Hauger is now the Norwegian Moonwalker of IndyCar racing. 11 laps after Dennis Hauger did his Michael Jackson impression on the racetrack, unfortunately for Alex Palou, memories of the 2023 Indianapolis 500 would come back to haunt him because he ended up tangling with Rinus VeeKay on the track, putting the Spaniard out of the race. So, after over a year of leading the IndyCar Championship, Alex Palou is not leading the championship at this time.
Shut up!
While David Malukas led the most laps of the race, 73, Christian Rasmussen, who led 69 of those laps, driving for Ed Carpenter Racing, was also in contention for the win. Unfortunately, at one point, on the backstretch, as he was duking it out with Will Power, they touched wheels, and they both suffered hard for it. But Will Power came off worse, while Christian was able to continue on, but Rasmussen was not happy with Will Power's disruptions. As a result, Will Power's car suffered damage and had to go into the pits when the pits were closed because of this caution that he ironically created, causing him to be penalized by being sent to the back of the field. But when all was said and done, it was Joseph Newgarden, Malukas' Penske teammate, that took victory for the first time since last year's final race in Nashville that Newgarden won. In fact, the last time IndyCar raced in Phoenix, it was Joseph Newgarden who won in 2018. Congratulations to Joseph Newgarden for winning in Phoenix, rising from the ashes of disappointment last year. Kyle Kirkwood of Andretti Global would finish second, unable to keep up with Newgarden since he was on more worn tires than Newgarden. With that said, Joseph Newgarden winning for Team Penske in Phoenix, and then 2 weeks later winning 1-2 with Porsche at the 12 Hours of Sebring, we anti-Penske fans have gotten creamed again. To answer your question about where the Marcuses finished in St. Petersburg and Phoenix, In St. Pete, Marcus Ericsson finished 6th and Armstrong 11th. In Phoenix, Marcus Armstrong finished 5th and Marcus Ericsson finished 17th. But at the inaugural GP of Arlington, Texas, the Swede Marcus Ericsson would get his first IndyCar pole in this race with Alex Palou starting 2nd. So let's just have a bite of Texas toast as I delve into the inaugural race that occurred in Texas. When the green flag flew for the first time in Arlington, it was pole sitter Marcus Ericsson who led on with Alex Palou close behind him. On top of everything else, the race was green flag for at least 98% of the race, so there wasn't really much to report. The most laps led were 16. Each of them came from Kyle Kirkwood, Alex Palou, and Will Power. Marcus Ericsson led 15 laps, while Felix Rosenquist of Meyer Shank led 7 laps. And the only highlight of the race under the green flag conditions was the fact that during pit stops, all 3 Andretti team boys had trouble getting their cars out cleanly, costing them precious time in the race. Some people might say the crews held accountable, but either way, would this play into somebody's hands or not? Either way, it sucks when you lose precious time in pits when unnecessary mistakes occur. Since I said that the race was 98% green flag conditions, for the reason that the race was 2% yellow, it occurred 4 laps from the finish when Christian Rasmussen's car was out with electrical problems on the track, and with Kyle Kirkwood leading at this time, Alex Palou 2nd, and Yellows be yellows. They were planning to restart the race with 1 lap to go, but unfortunately, as they were coming to the green flag restart, in the back of the field, Nolan Siegel of Arrow McLaren and Dale Coyne driver Romain Grosjean collided, so the race had to finish under yellow because they would not have been able to do it under green since they were they crashed before the start-finish line. This would ensure that Kyle Kirkwood would take home his first win of the IndyCar season, and on top of that, with Alex Palou finishing 2nd, and Will Power finishing 3rd in his debut year with Andretti Global, just less than 12 hours away from when Lewis Hamilton got his first Ferrari podium finish. I say congratulations to Will Power for finishing 3rd, and Marcus Ericsson would finish 4th, so a 1-3-4 for Andretti Global in Arlington, Texas. But as a result of Kyle Kirkwood's consistent finishes, 4th at St. Pete, 2nd in Phoenix, and now a win in Arlington, Kyle Kirkwood leads the championship, and it is definitely blowing up. Whoa! Wow. I knew that Kyle Kirkwood of Jupiter, Florida was on an electrifying charge, but I didn't know it was that shocking. Omerito to Sailor Jupiter for making her electrifying reaction clear as a bell. And kudos to Honda for finishing 1, 2, 3, 4 in Arlington with the best Chevy driver, Pato Ward, finishing 5th for our McLaren. I'm glad you're pleased with this too, Lelouch V. Britannia, for Japan coming out on top. Man, evil grin aside, I wish I had his looks. Anyway, with that said, with Kyle Kirkwood's momentum being as strong as ever, taking the championship lead, and with JM Bullion being his sponsor, I'd say he has a golden opportunity to get his face molded on that silver trophy, the Borg Warner, for the Indianapolis 500. Will he become this year's Indy 500 winner? Only time will tell. Well, seeing I need a haircut, I gotta get to the barber shop. And on top of that, with that being said, the next IndyCar round is this Sunday, March 29th, at Barber Park in Alabama. And at the same time, F1 returns to the Suzuka circuit in Japan. I'd have my money on Mercedes for running away with this one like they have been doing so far, but I don't count on Ferrari. And who knows how embarrassing the Honda effort with Aston Martin is going to suck at Japan. Can Cadillac get its first points in Japan? Who knows? As for the Ferrari that won the GTD category at Sebring earlier this past weekend, it was AF Corse Racing with Antonio Fuoco, Simon Mann, and Lilou Wadoux of France, French female racer I should add, who was driving that Ferrari to beat the Aston Martin to victory in GT Pro. United Autosport finished 1-2 in the LMP2 class, And in the GTD Pro, Porsche won 2 as well. Manthey Racing on top with AO Racing in second. If you want to have the 1-2 finishes of each of the 4 classes at Sebring, there you have it. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to Formula Pun Racer, where you don't have to be a racing fan to get a good laugh. Hit the notification bell for future video postings, and I'll see you in the next video. Who will be victorious in Barber Park and in Japan? Tune in to find out. See you in the next video, everyone. I am Aaron, cylinder firing on all cylinders.